Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents In the Wind, The Disappearance of Janice Starr, by Ron Peterson Jr., narrated by Tait. Introduction. It is said that truth is stranger than fiction, and the following story is proof of that. In the course of writing this true crime book, I interviewed over 30 sources involved in the 1981 Janice Starr missing person case. I was provided first-hand access to the original police files, crime scene photos, and police reports. My source material also included written transcripts from the 1981 police interviews of suspects and witnesses. For brevity, only the relevant portions of those interviews appear in this book. Every effort was made to tell this story as accurately and completely as possible. My primary source was retired detective Kay Schucker, who shared with me her extensive memories from working as the lead investigator in this landmark case from 40-plus years ago. As typically happens with recollections from decades gone by, information shared from many of my other sources may not precisely align. Some of my sources' memories of details are contradictory. In those instances, I did my best to piece together what I felt was the most accurate telling of events. Throughout the book, there is dialogue between the characters. In many instances, these may not be the actual words used by these individuals, but are a realistic representation of what was probably spoken and how it may have been said, based on my research and interviews. And finally, to protect the privacy and reputation of several individuals involved in this true story, some names have been replaced with pseudonyms. Chapter 1. Janice. Neck deep in the ocean, Janice Starr looked out at the horizon as a rolling wave approached. As she loved to do, Janice ducked beneath the Virginia Beach waves, submerging her head below the surface of the salty aqua-blue surf. Underwater, she felt totally at peace, weightless as the wave passed above. Some of Janice's happiest moments in life took place at beaches like this. This was one of those moments. It was the summer of 1981, and the beautiful Old Dominion University, ODU, student had her whole life in front of her. Not a care in the world. Janice came to the surface of the ocean, exhilarated, gracefully treading water as she looked toward the shore. Her boyfriend Randy was sitting on a blanket near the water's edge, smiling as he watched her. Janice waved and smiled back, her perfect white teeth a stunning contrast to her bronze tan, brown eyes, and long black hair. Enthusiastically, Janice motioned for him to join her. "Come on in, Randy," she yelled. "The water's awesome." Randy was happy to oblige, and he stood and walked to the water's edge. The cold, rolling surf greeted him as he waded through the breakers toward Janice. When he was waist deep, he dove headlong into a wave and swam through the chilly water until he reached her. Janice greeted him with a hug, and they held each other close, bobbing with the undulating ocean. Beneath the surface, she wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him tightly against her as she locked her ankles and squeezed. He felt her warmth. "I've got you now," she said in a sultry voice. They closed their eyes and shared a deep kiss, the salty sea lingering on their lips. Janice and Randy had been dating for 3 months. Their romance, like that of many young couples, was sparked by a strong physical attraction. Janice had fallen for Randy's blue eyes, curly blonde surfer boy hair, and fun-loving attitude the moment they met. And similarly, Janice's alluring beauty made her the kind of girl that Randy couldn't just date casually. Their relationship had progressed at record speed for both. When they went on their first date, they talked for hours, making effortless conversation, as both shared their hopes and dreams. On their second date, they slept together, the lovemaking exceeding both their expectations. Within a week, she had told him she loved him, and he'd reciprocated. They now lived together, having shared an apartment the past month, a step neither had envisioned happening so quickly. But in their hearts, it seemed like the right thing to do. Of that, there was no question. After enjoying the ocean surf together for about 10 minutes, Janice and Randy made their way ashore, arm in arm, back to their beach blanket. They sat side by side, as close together as they could be, and looked out over the ocean, admiring the incredible vista. They basked in the sun, as it slowly warmed their bodies. After a few minutes in wonderful silence, Randy reached into a foam cooler on the blanket, his hand emerging with 2 ice-cold cans of beer. Mischievously, he pressed one of the icy cans against the small of Janice's back, catching her by surprise. She flinched and let out a playful, high-pitched yelp, shivering. They laughed as Janice took the beer from Randy and opened it. Parched from her swim, Janice took a big sip, enjoying the taste of what would quickly lead to a midday beer buzz. She scooted even closer to Randy and laid her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. They were serenaded by the sights and sounds of waves crashing on a perfect 85-degree day. "It doesn't get any better than this," Janice said, quoting a familiar line from a popular television commercial of the time. Janice Starr was not a typical college student. Her age, 23, was one of several factors that set her apart from other ODU sophomores. In some ways, she was mature beyond her years. But in others, she had never quite grown up. Unlike most college coeds, she had been out and seen the world. A U.S. Army veteran, Janice had previously served her country for 3 years, spending much of that time traveling internationally, including duty at an Army base in Korea. But beneath her worldly exterior, she was quite vulnerable, as an upcoming series of events would soon show. Janice was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1958. Her given name at birth was Janice Lynn Weiner. Her parents, David and Jean Weiner, were of the Jewish faith, and her early years included an upbringing grounded in the tenets of Judaism. When Janice was 6 years old, her parents sat her down and told her they needed to talk with her. They were getting a divorce. Janice was totally blindsided. At only 6 years old, she understood the concept of divorce, but never thought it could happen to her family. As is often the case when children see their family collapse, Janice initially blamed herself and felt guilty. She had always been closer to her mother, so despite her father's efforts, Janice's relationship with him grew distant. Janice's mother was granted full custody, which seemed best for everyone involved. What had been an indifferent relationship with her father gradually deteriorated. As with so many children of divorce, Janice's emotions manifested in a fear of abandonment. According to friends and family, these abandonment issues seemed to follow Janice for the rest of her life. Janice's mother remarried within a year and a half, in 1965. Janice took the last name of her new stepfather, Starr, and from then on, her legal name was Janice Lynn Starr. Ted Starr was a successful insurance sales executive with Mutual of Omaha's New York office. He was a good husband to Janice's mother, and materially, Mr. Starr provided very well for the family. But his relationship with Janice was aloof and distant, similar to that of her birth father. Janice's mother was the main source of nurturing and love. Within a few years, Ted Starr received a promotion at work. Mutual of Omaha, perhaps best known in the 60s and 70s for its sponsorship of the popular television show Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, was in a period of rapid growth. Janice's stepfather was given the opportunity to relocate the family and become the unit manager for the company's Miami office. It was a great offer, one Mr. and Mrs. Starr could not refuse. Janice was initially upset over the move, but the change in latitude quickly became a welcome one. It was on the Miami beaches of South Florida during her teenage years, where she fell in love with the ocean. In school, she was an outlier socially, never quite finding her niche, despite participating in a healthy array of activities, clubs, and sports. Physically, Janice was attractive, and she had an engaging personality to match her good looks. This granted her popularity, but she did not fit squarely into any cliques, nor did she want to, taking pride in being a free spirit. She was content being a lovely beach bum. The 70s were an incredible time to be young in South Florida. Friends and family would later speak of Janice's early initiation into Miami's vibrant party lifestyle. The drinking age back then, 18 years old, was loosely enforced, so along with her high school friends, Janice gained admission to South Beach's coolest discos and nightclubs. Her beauty attracted plenty of male suitors, and she dated often. According to her friends at the time, Janice's tendency was to avoid serious romantic relationships, but she was seldom without male accompaniment. While schoolwork typically took a back seat to the South Beach nightlife for Janice, she continued to make good grades in high school. She was smart, savvy, and a fast learner. Her academic record shows all A's and B's in an advanced curriculum for college-bound students. Spiritually, by this point in her life, Janice had drifted away from Judaism, not attending temple as she had when she was younger. She occasionally joked that although she no longer considered herself Jewish, she was definitely Jew-ish, often obsessing over minor details and worrying about things that never came to pass. Janice graduated with honors from Miami's Killian Senior High School in June of 1977. The summer after graduation, she continued to spread her wings, enjoying even more freedom. Her days were spent at the beach, enjoying the ocean with friends. In the evening, she worked a job as a waitress. Then, late night after work, Janice made a beeline for the clubs, enjoying the Miami nightlife until the wee hours of the morning. Her stepfather's running joke was that Janice was getting quite a South Beach education, double majoring in guys and parties. As for her future, Janice's parents made it clear that they were willing to pay for her college education and support her financially, as long as she was a full-time college student and got good grades. She almost took them up on that offer, as it was clearly the easy route to take. But after considerable soul-searching, Janice declined, not feeling motivated to pursue any particular academic course of study or career field. Midsummer in 1977, Janice accompanied a boyfriend to his meeting with an Army recruiter. Quite by accident, she overheard the conversation and began to ponder the unique opportunity offered by Uncle Sam. The recruiter's pitch was well polished. Join the Army, see the world, and develop some self-discipline along the way. Attend college later on the GI Bill. By then, you'll be more mature and know what you want to do with your life. The message resonated with Janice, who had a deep desire to travel internationally. It was as if a giant light bulb went off above her head, cartoon style. She said, "This is what I want to do." Her close friends and family, surprised that Janice was interested in military service, did their best to discourage her. But by summer's end, on August 10, 1977, Janice signed her enlistment documents for the U.S. Army. Janice scored well on her preliminary physical training testing. Though she had not participated in competitive sports in high school, she had always been naturally athletic. Janice was in great physical shape, tall at 5'8", and not overweight. She had not previously jumped on the 70s jogging bandwagon, but was a strong runner. However, as one might expect, boot camp at Fort Benning, Georgia, was a rude awakening for Janice, the youngest recruit in her class of 20, and one of only 2 females. The grueling physical training was made even more difficult by the humidity of Georgia, which made the summer of '77 one of the hottest on record. But Janice proved to be a survivor. She endured not only the physical demands, but also the emotional abuse of her male drill sergeant and his non-stop taunts. As was his custom, the Sarge gave each recruit a derogatory nickname. Janice's was Barbie. The rigors of Army boot camp were designed to break a new recruit down physically, mentally, and emotionally, and rebuild them stronger. It was the training philosophy the U.S. Armed Forces were based on. All indications were that the military indoctrination process did indeed break Janice down, as intended. But there were also signs that, rather than rebuilding her emotionally stronger, the process instead planted a seed of inferiority. Though most recruits make it through boot camp with increased self-confidence, for Janice, it seemed to have had the opposite effect. Acquaintances would later describe her as less confident than before. Some friends attributed it to the constant reminder that she was a female in a male-dominated army, a woman in a man's world. Nonetheless, Janice was proud to be an Army soldier and was determined to bring honor to her uniform. After completing basic training, she was stationed at Fort Bragg, now known as Fort Liberty, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Her recruiter had previously given Janice hopes of an exciting duty assignment, perhaps intelligence or airborne. Instead, she received clerical training and was assigned to a typing pool in support of a logistics battalion, the standard female soldier's gig circa the late 70s. At that point, the culture in the Army workplace, as in every branch of the service, discriminated against female soldiers. Janice sometimes complained about it in conversations with coworkers, but was essentially told, as the musician Bruce Hornsby paraphrased in a song a decade later, "That's just the way it is." Janice was further disturbed to learn the military did little to discourage sexual harassment. Janice's beauty stood out, even with her in loose-fitting Army fatigues with no makeup and her hair tucked beneath her cap. Not surprisingly, she was a frequent target of innuendo and inappropriate advances in the office. Janice would later describe how she would sometimes show up for work in the morning to find Playboy or Penthouse magazines on her desk, or how her male coworkers went out of their way to tell dirty jokes in her presence. She ignored it, but when it persisted, she finally decided to report the harassment to her superior. Rather than intervene, the sergeant shrugged it off, telling Janice to stop being so thin-skinned. Janice dated occasionally in this period, but the only eligible men in the Army town of Fayetteville were fellow soldiers. As a result, she found the social landscape tough to navigate. Her dating relationships ran the gamut. One soldier she really cared for got frustrated when she wouldn't sleep with him. He ended their relationship and started a rumor on the base that she was a lesbian. Another fellow soldier she dated who outranked her turned out to be a kiss-and-tell type, sharing intimate details about their relationship with other soldiers on the base. They whispered behind Janice's back, sometimes deliberately talking loud enough for her to hear their crude comments. Fayetteville, as some called Fayetteville, sure was a long way from Miami's South Beach. After a year at Fort Bragg, Janice's chance for international travel finally came when she was transferred to South Korea in 1978. She was thrilled to be stationed at Camp Humphreys, located near Seoul, South Korea, one of the largest U.S. overseas military bases. There, good fate shined on her when she was assigned a roommate in base housing, a young lady who would quickly become her best friend, Paula Mateo, a pseudonym. Paula, originally from New Mexico, was of Native American heritage. She identified strongly with her indigenous ancestry, which had inspired her throughout her Army career. Paula had grown up as an Army brat, attending high school overseas in Germany at the Stuttgart American High School at U.S. Army Garrison Stuttgart. Paula had a lot in common with Janice, and they hit it off immediately. Both were fiercely independent and saw themselves as free spirits, trying their best to navigate the strict parameters of Army life and the challenges of being female in a man's world. Before long, Paula and Janice were inseparable, not only living together as roommates at the barracks, but also spending most of their free time together. In her conversations and letters with family and friends back home, Janice referred to Paula as the best friend I've ever had. Paula later said, "We loved each other as sisters. We were soulmates. It is difficult to explain how close we were. Many people assumed we were lovers. However, there was never any physical intimacy between us. We seemed to think alike and feel the same about so many things." At 24, Paula was 4 years older than Janice, and considerably wiser. Having grown up as an Army dependent, Paula was more familiar with the ins and outs of military life overseas. Janice found her insight to be invaluable. Paula and Janice often double-dated together, and Paula was a protector of sorts, helping Janice avoid the romantic pitfalls that had previously plagued her. Paula generally had a better read on social situations, and was quick to share those insights, for which Janice was always grateful. Like Janice, Paula always enjoyed a night on the town, and many of their evenings out together were spent in the familiar haze of smoky nightclubs and alcohol. This was not unusual for U.S. service members stationed in South Korea, a deployment that featured abundant nightlife opportunities. Most people who encountered Janice and Paula socially would have described Janice as the more physically attractive of the two, while Paula had the more engaging personality. If one were casting characters in a romantic comedy, Janice would have been the beautiful lead character, who often made bad choices in her relationships, and Paula would have been the loyal friend with high empathy, who was always there to provide sage advice. During their year together in Korea, Janice and Paula often talked about the future. Paula had previously earned her bachelor's degree and had set her sights on eventually attending law school. With Paula's encouragement, Janice became motivated to begin her college studies. By early 1979, Paula and Janice had made a joint decision to leave the Army. Good news arrived in the form of Paula's acceptance to George Washington University Law School, GW, in Washington, D.C. It was a metropolitan area that could also offer Janice several colleges to choose from to pursue her undergrad degree. Their plans firmed up in the fall of '79, when each accepted their honorable discharges from the Army and moved to the D.C. area. They rented an apartment together just across the Potomac River from the nation's capital, in Virginia's Old Town Alexandria area. Paula began law school at GW, while Janice enrolled at Northern Virginia Community College. Janice's plan was to attend community college for a few semesters, and then transfer to one of the region's four-year colleges, possibly the University of Maryland or George Mason University. Both Janice and Paula had the goal of re-enlisting in the Army once they had earned their degrees. While this might have seemed surprising, given some of the bad experiences they both encountered as enlisted personnel, each was highly motivated by the thought of being an Army officer. Once Janice had her bachelor's degree, she could re-enlist as a lieutenant and pretty much choose her field. And as for Paula, once she earned her law degree, she could become a military lawyer, known as a judge advocate in the JAG Corps, a very prestigious position. It was perhaps most encouraging to both Janice and Paula that as officers, neither would have to endure the discrimination they'd faced when they were enlisted. It would be a whole new ballgame. As Janice expressed in a letter to one of her high school friends back in Miami, "The same enlisted guys who used to harass me will have to salute me and follow my orders." Janice had maintained close contact with her parents, and once again they offered to step in and pay for her college education and living expenses. But Janice was now prouder than ever of her independence. She politely declined. The GI Bill would cover her tuition, and she could fund her living expenses by signing up for Army Reserve duty and serving 1 weekend a month. She also took a part-time job with a local tech company called DataTel, doing data entry. She was determined to make ends meet on her own, with no help from her parents. An excerpt from a composition Janice wrote for an English class her first semester at Northern Virginia Community College, titled Independence, perhaps best sums up her mindset at this point in her life. "Through sheer determination, I, as a single woman, endured 3 years of crude, belittling Army life. I have shown myself through this sheer determination that I can accomplish and succeed at the goals I have set." Janice's activities in these years were well documented because she kept a diary in a large spiral-bound notebook. A great deal of information could be gleaned about her lifestyle from these journal entries, diligently entered each day. From her diary entries, it was clear Janice was quite active socially. The entries described lively nights out with friends at bars in Old Town Alexandria, including the Fish Market, Bullfeathers, and Chadwick's. There were also mentions of weekend parties at the apartments and houses of new friends. Paula was her frequent companion. Her diary also describes details of several relationships with men. It would be easy to conclude from these journal entries that Janice tended to fall for a man very quickly. In one of many similar instances, she wrote, "Have only known Lionel for a week, but I swear I love him and think about him all the time," only to write a few days later that, "Lionel is such an asshole. He called me 3 or 4 times today and I didn't even answer the phone." Paula and other friends attested to Janice's emotional vulnerability. One friend noted that Janice was the type of person who would fall in love very quickly. She'd meet a man and have a strong romantic connection right away. Then, before you knew it, she'd fall out of love just as fast, break up with the guy, and never want to talk to him again. Given her life experiences to this point, it wasn't surprising that Janice seemed to struggle at times with her mental health. She wrote in one journal entry, "Have been really depressed all week," and in another, "My life is so damn depressing right now." Still another diary passage is particularly concerning. "Sometimes I wonder if my life is even worth it. I mean, why should I even go on?" In a related theme, her diary also reveals that, like many young women, Janice struggled with body image. Pictures of Janice from this period show a beautiful young lady with an attractive figure, yet some of her diary passages are quite to the contrary. Janice wrote more than once, "I am so fat." In the summer of 1981, she wrote, "Am starving, but have not eaten anything all weekend. Lost 8 pounds and look a lot thinner." Then, 2 weeks later, she described an eating binge. "Got home from work and ate 5 pieces of pizza. Stuffed myself. Slept for 2 hours, woke up and ate half a bag of chocolate chip cookies. Shit, I am fat now." Very often it was her best friend and closest confidant who was there to provide emotional support to Janice. Paula would later say, "Looking back, Janice..."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?